Heaven sent.
I had recently posted a poll on my channel asking you guys about which characteristic in a video game is your favorite. And with the majority of you guys voting for visual design, I couldn't agree anymore. Now I realize that it's necessary to factor in all these other options to make for a great gaming experience. But for me personally, my initial draw towards a game is typically because I like the way that it looks. Whether it's something about the way the characters are designed or the overall vibe that the game's world gives off, I can usually find myself at the doorstep of a so-called aesthetically pleasing title rather than one that is known for having a great story or some challenging gameplay. Now it's not to say that I don't appreciate these traits as well, I'm just a visual kind of guy. With that being my favorite characteristic in a game, I thought I would take you guys back to my personal favorite time for gaming. That being the years of 1998 to 2004. During this 5-year span, the Y2K era was at its peak, and its utopian-esque, futuristic aesthetic was pretty much found in everything. Now for all my returning viewers, this comes as no surprise to y'all, as I cover a lot of games from this era, and I'm usually found rambling on about how cool they look. But for this video in particular, I wanted to really take some time to dig into the world of these surreal looking visuals, whether it be the advertising, design choices, or just the gameplay experience in general. There was a lot of really interesting stuff coming out this time, so if that sounds any fun to you, let's get ready to hop into the time machine and go back a couple of decades into the past as we dive into the surreal aesthetic of 2000s gaming. Many can speculate as to which time period was the greatest cultural shift for gaming. Whether it be the 80s, with every hand in a quarter-mile radius gripping on a joystick in sheer wonder, or the early 90s, making console gaming a new standard for convenience and variety. It's all a bit suggestive in terms of influence, but if numbers can back one thing, it's that the gaming industry has been on a steady rise for multiple decades now. At first glance, these virtual worlds seem nothing more than a novelty for corporate suits and investors. But with consumer demand steadily increasing in the late 90s to early 2000s, the presence of gaming and advertising began to make an appearance in almost every form of media possible. So I did a little bit of digging and gathered quite the collection of some of my favorites from that time. So without further ado, let's get started.
New for 2078. PlayStation 9's new electronic spores tap straight into your adrenal gland. PS9 has improved retinal scanning. A mind control system. Holographic movie surround vision. And telepathic personal music. The ultimate just got better. PlayStation 9. Teleport yours today.
Pretty cool, right? Now around this time, Sony had become somewhat infamous for their bizarre ad campaigns, especially when it came to the PS2. Some of them even stemmed a bit of controversy for their questionable subject matter. But one thing for sure, they were absolutely iconic. The Sleepless Nights ad, being one of their most memorable, is a testament to this experimental type of advertising, taking the button shapes of the PlayStation controller and cleverly placing them into the bloodshot human eye. Now as far as this one goes, it's hard to say what they were actually going for, but it's definitely eye-catching. I specifically remember seeing this advert in a gaming magazine that I used to own, and while it for sure spooked me as a child, I've come to grow an appreciation for its surreal concept after all these years. This one on the other hand is not as much surreal as it is a bit disturbing, but all of my research points in the direction of it being an actual very real advertisement, which is honestly bonkers to me. The crazy thing about these old PlayStation ads is the fact that none of them really have anything to do with gaming, but they fit in so well with that time period of gaming that it just makes sense, you know? Now this one I really love. It's got that whole Y2K aesthetic down to a T, and the text of wherever, whenever, forever is just so damn badass to me. Such a great slogan for emphasizing on how impactful this console was destined to be. Like, I would wear this as a shirt today. Very powerful stuff. Now, it's obvious that they were doing a great job to create some really memorable advertising, but they weren't the only ones. With the turn of a new millennium came a whole wave of consoles being ushered into the 6th generation, with competition being at its peak and the race to be the best console. All the other companies were making use of similar trends to catch the eye of their hopeful consumers. But before we move on to those, maybe we should take a quick step to a couple of years before the PlayStation 2 was launched, with the Sega Dreamcast. When the debate of consoles that were ahead of their time comes up, my vote will always reside in the arms of the Sega Dreamcast, a system that was both greatly underappreciated and savagely overlooked. It also seemed responsible for many of the innovations we've grown accustomed to in present time, from the feature of a built-in internet browser, next-gen fully 3D graphics, to the clever use of the visual memory unit. This console was everything a gamer could ask for in the presence of a new millennium, and with it being released almost a full year before the previously mentioned PS2, you would have thought it may have reigned supreme in the wake of a new generation of gaming. That's not to say that Sega didn't try their best to nab the attention of all that partook in the act of virtual exploration, as their ad campaigns were a testament to such efforts. What better way to gain the attention of a younger demographic than by using the Attitude Era's finest a Limp Bizkit in your advertising? This was an advert for Sega Net, the online service that was used by the Dreamcast, and everything about it is just pure nostalgic bliss to me. Like, I need a copy of this framed in my game room immediately. Plus, I'm willing to bet that Fred Durst was a definite Lizardman main. Hey, I'm just saying. Next up, we get a look at the 1999 special issue of the official Dreamcast magazine. And what a delight to the eyes this one is. It's got that comforting early 2000s feel, tasteful design, and a clever innuendo. What more could you ask for? Just imagine walking into a bookstore to see this bad boy looking back at you. I would definitely be grabbing myself a copy. Echo the Dolphin is easily one of my favorite titles for the Dreamcast, so when I stumbled upon this ad in my research, I just knew I had to include it. It's stylish, it's nostalgic, and most definitely very weird, but this man's outfit is just enough to tell you what era it came from. I also thought that the floating cat was a great touch. Now we can finally retrieve those pesky goldfish. Also, take note of this little quote in the bottom right: "The weight of the ocean rests on your dorsal fin." Just another example of the many weird monologues that these ads would include. I've been told many times that I'm missing out on the Rayman series, and after stumbling upon this gem right here, I think I'll soon be changing that. I mean, they really just don't make them weird like this anymore. Now, the last of the Dreamcast adverts, I'd like to run some footage from their It's Thinking campaign, just to show you guys how surreal some of these could really get. Almost creepy in a way.
Watch this. I've got a plan. I can beat this thing.
X.
Why?
Think out loud in criteria.
It's thinking.
Nintendo is typically known for their family-friendly approach to marketing, but thinking back on the fresh release of the Nintendo Gamecube, they weren't willing to be left behind in the trending world of surreal advertising, following suit with a litany of strange, cube-themed ads. But rather than just showing you images, why don't you all just take a look for yourself in this advertisement right here.
You've got one night to save Mario from the supernatural. This game will scare you silly. Luigi's Mansion, only on Nintendo Gamecube.
In my opinion, this was some of Nintendo's finest work, given the fact that such a clean-cut company was willing to edge out and get crazy with the rest of them. Really made for a creative approach in their marketing. Now, the Xbox was no stranger to these practices as well, combining the edge and style of this surreal era with their own green-tinted flair. There was plenty of Xbox weirdness circulating around at this time, one of the most memorable being this advert right here. Pretty strange, huh? While I do typically favor the 6th gen of consoles, the GameCube actually wasn't Nintendo's first attempt at a stylish press run either. While this style of advertising may be a bit less dramatic compared to our previous mentions, the certain style that they were making use of had this very unique aesthetic to it that I can't quite put a name to. Let's check out some examples. The first thing that usually catches my eye about this style is the color schemes, as they would usually make use of a blend of purples or greens to match with the N64's aesthetic. It would also include these little write-ups that would really hype the player up for a fun experience. I don't know if it's the nostalgia talking or what, but I really miss this style of advertising. Next up, we've got one that is more in the vein of a surreal art style. And man, is it gorgeous. Once again popping in those stylish greens with a mix of pinkish hues, making for some almost creepy yet engaging advertising. Tetrasphere was definitely a tough nut to crack on the N64, but I never knew it was enough to chip teeth. And there's another one of them edgy captions we love to see. This is Tetrasphere. It has the same great taste as Tetris, only in 3D. You center on penetrating its core, it centers on stopping you. Really cool stuff. Doom 64. Where do I begin? It might not be the most celebrated of the series, but it was surely responsible for a fair bit of my childhood nightmares. This advertisement right here being a prime example of the edge that this game brought to such an innocent console. And the quote, of course, being on brand with such an edge. Only the N64 could handle a Doom this tough. So now you can go out in a blaze of glory or a body bag. Ooh, chilling. And lastly, this is a game that has always piqued my interest, based off the cover art alone, that being Forsaken on the N64. This one is less text heavy, but uses plenty of imagery to spark an emotion from its viewer. From the beautiful woman with a lonely tear falling from her eye, to the quote of the future is forsaken. Just one look at this is enough to evoke some serious curiosity in wanting to play this game. Definitely one of my favorites from this era. Now I'm sure you all get the gist of these examples. There's a lot of really dope advertising that was made to be weird or as attention grabbing as possible, and it's something I really miss getting to see in gaming magazines and such from back in the day. But anyways, hopefully I didn't spend too much time on that, as we still have a lot to cover. So on that note, let's move on to our main topic of discussion, that being the games themselves. So to kick things off, I thought we would start with the lesser known title that was found on the PS2. And while it may not have been the best experience gameplay wise, it's got a visual style that's well worth a lengthy glance. So put on your favorite pair of 2000's sunglasses and get ready to go rogue in the 2004 release of Sigh Girls. When looking back on the works of Konami, you may find your thoughts drifting into the direction of the Metal Gear series more often than not. While Kojima-san and his prestigious team of developers are well known for putting Konami on the map with their top-tier espionage action, the Metal Gear series wasn't their only stealth shooter to ever come sneaking its way on the store shelves. It all began with an action figure line in Japan, known as Cool Girls, which were essentially elite top-secret agents fitted with stylish spy outfits. These figures and their interchangeable memories quickly rose to popularity among consumers. When Konami smells money, you can bet your sweet bippy they were ready to capitalize on this demand in any way possible. So they decided, what the hell, how about we take the Cool Girls characters, throw them in a video game, and call it Sigh Girls. So was the word on the street at the 2002 Tokyo Toy Show. And with the announcement of Konami dipping their toes into a stealth shooter chock full of beautiful women, people were actually quite giddy on this idea. Now this is a game that first caught my attention on the cover art alone. I mean, just take a look. Those nostalgic character renders, the futuristic font, and of course, a gorgeous pair of femme fatales. You know I had to take an extended look at the back of the box. Going to the back, we see some pretty intriguing screenshots of the in-game action, as well as a look into the game's narrative, which upon further research is practically set in a Y2K style scenario. Basically, the game takes place in the year of 2084, in which a global disaster known as Damnation Monday has occurred, causing a worldwide power failure and a subsequent collapsing of the world's economy. Two CG agents known as Ice and Asuka are sent for the job of destroying an information file on this event. but it's going to take plenty of stealth and bullets to get the job done. Or if you're Asuka, the use of her trusty katana. It's not the most stimulating of plots, but like I said, the main selling point of this game for me was in its visuals, specifically the cutscenes. It's hard to explain what it is about these early 2000s FMVs, but man do they scratch a certain itch in my brain. In Sigh Girls, everything just looks so damn stylish, and really fits the mold of that Y2K aesthetic that we've grown so fond of. Something about the surreal appearance of these beautiful super soldiers is more than enough to keep you glued to the screen, despite whatever mediocrity the actual gameplay throws at you. That's not to say that the gameplay isn't beautiful as well. One of my favorite visual moments of the game is in your character's ability to enter the cyber dimension, also known as Sid. In this reality, the world around you becomes entirely digital, and you're tasked with acquiring new skills and movesets through a variety of different data points spread about. It's got that kind of Matrix jacking in type of feel that I really dig about it. Plus, the level design in general is quite impressive for a game of this era. Overall, Sigh Girls is a stylish addition to the world of surreal aesthetics, and is one that I've grown quite fond of upon playing. But this next game on our list really turns things up a notch, so I think it's time for us to pump up the volume and prep our eyes for some visual delight in the 2001 classic of Rez on the PlayStation 2. The 90s club scene was certainly one to remember. The vibes were high, the music was sensational, and as for the drugs, well, this guy seemed to be taking all of them. All jokes aside though, the electronic music scene was really having a breakthrough at this moment in time. When legendary artists such as the Chemical Brothers, Crystal Method, and Aphex Twin were just beginning to rise in the ranks of clubs worldwide, the presence of electronic music in gaming was also beginning to take hold. I can pretty much solely contribute my love for such music to video games, as there's nothing quite like a dope trance album or groovy drum and bass melody to keep me on the joysticks all night long. And with the genre of rhythm-based gaming quickly becoming a popular choice, many gamers across the globe just couldn't get enough of those timed button presses. But when looking back on some of the more stylish offerings from this time period, the musical rail shooter by the name of Rez is just about as aesthetically pleasing as they come. Taking inspiration from the European rave culture of the 90s, the game's producer, Tetsuya Misaguchi, wanted to create a surreal, almost hallucinogenic experience in the gameplay. Combining a virtual landscape of wireframes and digital chaos, they wanted this game to look unlike anything else on the market. And just one look at the game's cover art is more than enough to warrant some serious curiosity about its gameplay. It was said that the art design was heavily inspired by Russian abstract artist Wassily Kandinsky, and even decided to name the early prototype Project K in his honor. But this abstract style was later scrapped for a more 80s style of virtual graphics that were found in earlier games such as Missile Command. And if I had to make a direct comparison, it looks as if you're playing a video game inside of the Windows Media Player visualizer. Yeah, I know. The game's narrative, however, was very mysterious. With no real cutscenes or introduction into the game's world, you're wondrously thrown into the musical genius of Rez and its gameplay. The plot itself matches up with the game's look quite nicely, as you take control of a hacker sent to journey through cyberspace in order to awaken artificial intelligence by the name of Eden. Throughout this journey, you'll breach the security of the network with time button presses and quick reflexes, all the while building the momentum of each level's soundtrack and watching a visual spectacle unfold. Now I should also mention a strange little addition to this game, as I'm quite the fan of oddball peripherals, that being the trance vibrator. Now it was stated many times by the game's producer that they wanted Rez to induce a sense of synesthesia in its players, which goes without saying that the player was going to need to feel something just as much as they were seeing it. So in the Japanese version of Rez, they included this vibrating peripheral that was also linked to the vibration function of the DualShock, allowing players to feel the game's sensory cues in not only their feet, but anywhere else the sun doesn't shine, if you're into that sort of thing. But going back to the topic at hand, Rez is by far one of the most unique games I've ever played, as it gloriously succeeds in delivering a surreal experience. So if you find yourself in need of a little vacation from the everyday routine, I can't recommend to dive into Rez's digital dreamscape enough, but just make sure to play it with some headphones. You won't be sorry that you did. Are you a sucker for dystopian settings with an atmosphere thicker than Dolly Parton's bra strap? If so, then boy do I have the game for you. When digging through the trenches of my cranium for what games I wish to include in this video, I decided to think back on a more obscure moment in my life. That being a game that I had played on a demo disc about 20 some odd years ago. And as someone who loves to explore video games, I may have to give a fair bit of credit to Omikron, the Nomad soul, for introducing me to such a niche hobby. Now, giving the cover art a quick glance, you may recognize this bluish fellow on the front as none other than rock legend David Bowie. That's because he actually composed a large majority of the soundtrack, appears in game, and even had his wife modeled into a character that can be used by the player. Pretty interesting, huh? But enough on the behind the scenes stuff. Let's get into the visual side of things. The game is set in a dystopian metropolis known as Omikron, divided by 5 different sectors in which the player can freely explore, and explore it you truly must. What I love the most about this game is in its atmosphere. From the very moment you begin your playthrough, you can't help but to take in its overwhelming aesthetic. The sights, sounds, and people make it all feel so alive. The ambiance is thick and droning. The citizens, they feel untrustworthy, and every building you enter has a strange nostalgia to it. Especially this little cafe I'd stumbled upon. Something about it feels oddly comforting. And the same can be said for the city itself, despite its dark and hopeless appearance. It's a game that's been vastly overlooked throughout time, and I'd be surprised if anyone watching right now has ever heard of it. But given the fact that its interesting look has been burned into my brain for multiple decades at this point, just goes to show how well of a job they did in supplying this game with a charming yet surreal design. If you're interested in checking the game out for yourself, I recommend the Dreamcast port, as I found the controls were a bit more manageable compared to the PC. But hey, that's just me. Anyways, we've got more to uncover in this list, and the next game is somewhat of a darling in the world of fighting games. So without further ado, let's get jiggly with it, in the mesmerizing world of Dead or Alive 2. I know that it's usually par for the course that I include 1 or 2 questionable games in my niche discussions, so I'm sure you all are wondering why I would include DOA 2 in this list. Well, to be completely honest, it's a combination of things. Playing this game is like entering a time machine back to 1999. Whether it be the game's nostalgic soundtrack, the futuristic feel of the level design, or the smooth, almost dreamy look of the game's characters. This is one of those games that is truly a feast for the senses, and it's a shame it only took me 25 years to realize just how special it was for its time. The cover art is one that is still incredibly eye-catching to this day, and it takes me back to those simpler times of staring at a massive selection of Dreamcast titles through the glass at a game store. The bold color schemes, the characters with that infamous late 90s CGI look to them, and the big bold Dead or Alive 2, such a tasteful design. It really makes you want to see what this game is about, and for the sake of this video, I had to fire it up again for old time's sake. Now I'm aware that DOA 2 is found in a variety of different forms, from the original, hardcore, to ultimate, but for the sake of keeping things OG, I decided to use the original Dreamcast version for my research. I'm a sucker for a good menu screen, and as soon as that intro music hits, you already know I'm ready to spam that block button and hit some cheeky leg sweeps. Jumping right into the story mode, I couldn't help but to find myself feeling incredibly nostalgic. With Danger Zone being a staple map in the second entry, I felt right at home getting to revisit it again all these years later. My skills hadn't aged quite as well as the level design, but it felt as if I was being reacquainted with an old friend. When picking this game apart for its aesthetic appeal, there's a lot of things to mention. From the 3D renders of each character icon, the font used to display your counters and attacks, the outfits, the music, even the comedic translating. It's also charming in its own way, and I feel it's this overall package that makes this game so special to the DOA fanbase. Whenever I go back and play these older games, I generally try to envision myself playing them at the time they were released. You know, comparing them to other games of that era and taking note of what made them stand out at that time. And this combat is just so damn fluid, even 25 years down the road. The counter system is one that always fascinated me, as it really made a great punishment for those infamous button spammers. The dynamic environment supplied each fight with a cinematic appeal, and more often than not, I found myself completely immersed in the game's digital landscape. Not to mention, that incredible feeling of completing a story run and hearing those end credits. Truly priceless. All in all, I deem this game to be one of the more aesthetically pleasing titles of the Y2K era. While it may not look as bizarre or over the top as some of our previous mentions, it definitely wears its age incredibly well after all this time. It's no secret that we're big fans of extreme sports titles here on the channel. From skateboarding to BMX, aggressive inline to human pachinko, we love it all. So if you thought this cover art right here wasn't enough to spark my interest as a baggy pantsed, frosted tip child of the new millennium, then you're dead wrong, my friend. Airblade, a PlayStation 2 exclusive that was released on January 29, 2002, is our next example of the surreal stylings of this beloved era. You've got over-the-top stunts, a nonsensical story plot, and plenty of late 90s skater fashion to tie this game up into one of the most charming packages I can recall. The idea all began with a little game known as Trick Style, a Dreamcast and Windows title from the late 90s, in which you would race hoverboards throughout a variety of different locales. It was similar to the likes of series such as SSX, but was vastly overlooked in terms of exposure. Criterion Games, the ones responsible in developing Trick Style, thought it'd be cool to take this idea into the next gen of consoles, turn up the cool factor, and make possibly one of the most Y2K games of all time. The concept of futurism runs heavy in the visual design, as well as the characters throughout the game, with the plot centering around a tyrannical corporation looking to destroy a hoverboard created by a hopeful inventor. After being kidnapped, the hoverboard in question falls into the hands of a young skater named Ethan, who uses the board as a means of destroying this evil corporation and bringing its creator back to safety. It's not the most in-depth of scenarios by any means, but that's okay, given the fact that the game plays in the style of your average arcade experience, placing you in an arena and giving you a set number of objectives to complete before the time runs out. The kicker to this is, if you fail to reach all objectives by the given time, you have to start over from scratch, and given the game's sometimes steep difficulty, this can be incredibly frustrating. But it wasn't enough to keep me from buying into its charming gameplay and aesthetic appeal. One of my favorite things about this game is how incredibly well the visuals aged over time. I mean really, just take a moment and observe these graphics. Everything from the level design, character models, even the lighting, it all feels believable, but in a kind of dreamy sense, you know what I mean? It almost reminds me of something you would see in a movie or TV show. You know, when they've got someone in a scene playing a video game and it just looks totally pre-rendered? Yeah, Airblade has that kind of look to it. But when you're actually sitting down and controlling the fluid motions of Ethan and his hoverboard, it's really incredible to see from a game that's over 20 years old. Plus, any protagonist who's cultured enough to rock a t-shirt over a long sleeve is A-OK in my book. My man. But all that aside, Airblade is far from perfect in terms of gameplay. Its clunky control schemes and unforgiving objectives are more than enough reason to warrant some serious frustration. But if you're willing to take things a little less serious and enjoy a game that was beautifully designed, Airblade is definitely a worthy contender in the world of retro gaming. But all that aside, it's time for us to move on to a more obscure selection on our roster. For all you Shin Megami fans out there, you'll be sure to get a kick out of this one. So prepare to get weird in the Dreamcast exclusive of Shin Megami Tensei, Maken X. Going back to the year of 1987, the very first game in the Megami Tensei series was released for the Famicom system. Digital Devil Story, being the very first entry, was widely praised for its unique setting and addictive gameplay. Beginning its rise to interest for many role-playing fanatics of the early console craze, the series had continued on well into present day, boasting an incredible variety of different sequels and spin-offs, all to varying success. It's an IP that isn't afraid to expand its horizons. But if we had to discuss one game in the roster that seems to go overlooked the most, it would be Maken X, for the Dreamcast. The concept of Maken itself is quite surreal on its own. You play as Kei Sagami, who is visiting a facility in which her father works as a scientist. They are developing a weapon infused with a sentient being called Maken, when all of a sudden, the lab is attacked by a knife-spitting maniac, and Kei's father is kidnapped in the process. Kei takes hold of the Maken and becomes one with it, allowing her to use its various powers and even brainjack other foes. And if you thought that was weird, wait until you see the enemies. The Shin Megami series is well known for its dark and creative art style, and in the case of Maken X, it's no exception. Take for example this Mafia boss. Get it? Because he's a moth in the Mafia? Oh whatever. There's an impressive variety of nightmarish foes to rain down upon, and getting to face them head on in a first person view is a nice change of pace for a series that's typically turn-based. The combat itself is pretty simple and almost feels like something you would find in an arcade. You'll traverse a variety of different levels, slicing down foes and collecting power-ups, as well as defeating bosses and brainjacking them for their abilities. And while it isn't the most complex in the series by any means, its ambitious art style and liminal level design really fits snugly into the theme of surreal aesthetics. Plus there's an enemy on rollerblades. They gotta get some extra points for that. The game's narrative, however, is quite short, as a leisure playthrough will run you anywhere from 4 to 5 hours. But with multiple characters to unlock and a good variety of different endings to experience, there's plenty of incentive to revisit its bizarre narrative more than once. It also carries some of those B-movie-esque charms to it, given the fact that it has some of the most diabolical voice acting I've ever heard. All in all though, I thought it was a quirky little addition to this already strange list of games we've covered. Plus, I do my best to shed light on any of the more obscure titles I come across. I know some of you guys have been waiting for me to cover Atlas games on the channel, so this one's for the fans. But anyways, it looks like that's all we've got for today's video. Please comment down below any of the games I may have forgotten or have yet to play, as I'm always looking for new ideas. I also want to give a shout out to my supporters on Patreon, that being AJ's Place, Michael Loftman, Niku Nicole, Riley McFadden, Sage, and Star95. All the extra support really means the world to me, and I'll have something very special going up on the Patreon this following week. Also, thank you to each and every one of you that watched this video, and to all of you wonderful people who have been supporting me on this journey to 20k subs. It's been an amazing year for the channel, and I'm incredibly excited for all the future content that I have planned. But until next time, my name is Vincent. Take care guys, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace out.